What's going on, everybody? Good Tuesday morning. A lot of people probably returning to work today, so hope your Tuesday goes well. 3rd of January, the 2nd for a lot of people. I think a lot of people don't work on the 2nd, so hope your first day back at work of the new year goes well. And yeah, we're going to talk about this a little bit more because it's a bunch of BS and it has a pretty big effect on the Seahawks, and I'm not going to sit here and act like it doesn't matter. This is a big deal. And I think the NFL has really broken precedent by doing this. And at the end of this video, I'm going to try to explain why I feel that way. But yeah, so for those of you who maybe missed the conversations yesterday and the video yesterday, Packers-Lions is at Sunday Night Football. It's been moved to Sunday Night Football, which means the Lions, if the Seahawks win, will know they have nothing to play for on Sunday night. And that puts the Seahawks in a less advantageous situation where if these games had been played at the same time, then the Lions are obligated to give everything they got because in their mind they might be playing for the playoffs. They don't know. Now they know. Now they're going to know. So, quite frankly, I don't know how I can have a channel like this on YouTube and not continue to talk about this because this is a big deal. And it didn't need to be this way. And the NFL made it this way. And I can't help but look at it and go, they're trying to give the Packers every single advantage. And there have been some people, including a few Seahawks fans, who have kind of pushed back on it. I see these sentiments expressed in my comments saying things like, well, you know, it's our fault because we lost those games to the Raiders, to the Panthers, to the Saints, to the Falcons. And look, I agree. When this season is over, if the Seahawks win on Sunday and the Packers win and the Packers get in, I'm going to be more irritated with the way the Seahawks lost winnable games than I am the NFL for scheduling Week 18 this way. Sure. Obviously, when we get to that point, I'm going to be saying, yeah, the Seahawks should have taken care of their business so they're not in this situation in Week 18. But I want to talk about that mentality of like, oh, well, it's the Seahawks' fault. Let's not act like the Packers have had some great season, guys. Why do the Packers get the advantage? They have the same record as us. If the Seahawks and Packers win on Sunday, both teams have the same record. You look at the Packers' schedule. They lost 5 games in a row at one point this season. 5 games in a row. And actually, at one point in the season, they lost 7 of 8 games, with the one win being an overtime win. So, yeah. Have they had some amazing season where they deserve to get all the breaks and all the benefits and all the, you know, help from the NFL? No. Look at this. They went on a streak this year where they lost 7 of 8 games. And some of those games were against good teams, but they got blown out by the Jets. They lost to Washington. Washington's proven they're not a very good team. They lost to the Lions. That's a okay team, but nothing great. I mean, this Packers team, it's not like they've had a great season either. They're not going to have a better record than Seattle if Seattle wins on Sunday, regardless of what Green Bay does. So I don't buy this argument that it can just be about, oh, the Seahawks need to take care of their business. Why don't the Packers take care of their business? If the Packers beat Washington in Week 7, then they don't even have to worry about this game. Then they're not affected by this. Same argument could apply to them, but for some reason, it's okay for them to get the advantage. I've seen some other arguments as well about this, basically saying that, well, the Lions are still going to play hard. Lions are still going to be motivated to knock the Packers out. They hate the Packers. Dan Campbell's not going to let that team lay down. Guys, let me try to describe the situation here. If the Seahawks win, the Lions are going to find out less than an hour before kickoff that their season is over and they've been eliminated. They're going to go into Sunday thinking they have a chance. And if the Seahawks win, they're going to find out about an hour before kickoff that it's done. How does that not deflate you on some level? Dan Campbell can do whatever he wants to do, say whatever he wants to say. Maybe a lot of the players on that team are going to still be motivated to do whatever they need to do. Maybe you're going to see guys like Jared Goff go, well, I'm still going to go out and do everything I can. You're going to see guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown. But somewhere down the line, There are going to be players on that team that are deflated. We usually don't see examples like this in the NFL because the NFL generally tries to prevent this, but I'm going to try to give the opposite example. I'm going to talk about this game for a second here, and this might seem like I'm pulling it out of thin air, but this is one of the most memorable games that I have ever seen in the NFL. Let me try to describe the scenario here of this game because it's the opposite of what we're talking about with the Lions potentially. The Philadelphia Eagles host the Dallas Cowboys in Week 17 of the 2008 season. The Cowboys went into this game knowing they were winning in, losing out. The Eagles didn't. The Eagles knew they needed a couple of minor miracles in other games. They needed the Bears to lose and I think the Bucks to lose in order to actually be able to make the playoffs. So they went in not knowing. And then the early games got played. The Bears lost and the Buccaneers lost. It was a long shot, but it came through, and the Eagles, right before kickoff, just a few minutes before kickoff, learned they were in winning in. They didn't know going into the day. They thought they were probably toast. But the results broke the right way for the Eagles, where this became a de facto playoff game for them, same as the Cowboys. And the Eagles rode a wave of emotion and won the game 44-6. And I remember watching this game very well. The Eagles scored 2 defensive touchdowns. They scored multiple touchdowns off of turnovers. They forced a turnover on a kickoff that led to 3 points. They took the Cowboys' heads off. It was a slaughter. And let's keep in mind here, the Cowboys and Eagles during the regular season that year were basically equivalent teams in terms of quality. The Eagles were a 9-win team that year after this game, 9-6-1. Cowboys were 9-7. This game had no business being 44-6. These were 2 equally matched teams, roughly. So what happened? The Eagles played better, okay, but what explains a 38-point whooping in a game between 2 barely above average teams? The Eagles were riding high because they had just found out they had a chance to make it. So how is the opposite not going to happen to the Lions? If they find out right before their kickoff that they've been eliminated, how is that not going to have at least something of the opposite effect? How? These are human beings, guys. These are not robots. Dan Campbell cannot program them to give maximum effort no matter what the stakes are. Sorry, that's not how it works. I don't have great examples of teams finding out they're eliminated right before kickoff because usually it doesn't happen unless they already knew they were probably going to be eliminated before the game kicked off, like the Eagles probably thought they were going to be. But I would assume that in that circumstance, when it has happened, it usually doesn't go well for the team that just had the air let out of the balloon. So to the people out there who are saying, oh, it doesn't matter, the Lions are going to try hard regardless, maybe mostly, but margins in the NFL are thin. A couple of players not being fully invested, a couple of players not being completely there, that's a big deal. So I'm not buying this argument that it's not that big of a deal. So I want to push back on that as well. These are human beings who are affected by emotion. And the other argument I want to address here that people are saying about this is, oh, well, the NFL is obligated to schedule a really good game, a really compelling game. These are 2 8-8 teams. These are 2 teams that have gone on hot streaks at the end of the year to make themselves available for the playoffs. So the NFL is obligated to schedule the best game possible with as much stakes as possible. If the Seahawks lose, by the way, this is literally a playoff game, winning in for both. So they have to schedule the game because it's the biggest game. And the NFL always wants to make a Sunday night football game be as compelling as possible in Week 18 or the final week of the year. And I'm sorry, I'm just not buying it. 2 years ago, last week of the season, we had this game, Washington versus Philadelphia. Now, Washington was playing for a playoff spot. Okay. But that was a bad team. They were just kings of a terrible division. Washington needed to win to get in at 7-9. If Washington lost, the Giants would have gotten in at 6-10. So that's not that compelling. Everybody knows that team is just going to get beat when the playoffs start. What's the big deal? And the Eagles, on the other side of that, the Eagles, this game meant nothing. The Eagles were one of the worst teams in the league. Is this really the game you want to make your big primetime game for the week? I wouldn't think so. Not on the strength of the opponent. This game meant so little for the Eagles. This was the infamous tank game, where the Eagles literally started playing backups and intentionally going for it on 4th down just so they could make sure they lost because they wanted their season to have as few wins as possible for the draft. So I'm not seeing a great game here. I'm not seeing the most compelling game of the week here. And by the way, if you want to make the argument that the game was big because Washington was playing for a playoff spot, even if Philly was playing for nothing, let's take a look at this game. Now, you notice how this game is the last game listed for the Week 17 slate? You notice how it's listed last year? Now, what is the last game typically going to be in the last game of the season on the slate? It's going to be Sunday night, right? But you scroll down, you can see it started at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. That's not Sunday Night Football. So, where's Sunday Night Football this week? Where was Sunday Night Football Week 17, 2017? It didn't exist. The NFL decided not to have a Sunday Night Football game. Why? Because they wanted things to play out organically. They didn't want one team to know too much information or two teams to know too much information going into their final game of the year. What an interesting concept. Why not do that again this week? Why not force the Lions to not know their fate before the game is played? They did it before. This was 5 years ago. They had no Sunday Night Football for a week. You can go look this up. I even found the old article on it. No Sunday Night Football Week 17 of 2017. They didn't find a game that they thought fit the bill. Like, again, look, the New Orleans-Tampa Bay game is the last game listed here. Started at a normal time. It was not Sunday Night Football. So, not buying that as an argument. You can just not have Sunday Night Football. Or you could have it be a game that only matters for one team. There's going to be a game like that. We just don't know exactly what that game might be because it's contingent on Monday night, which is why they shouldn't have announced the schedule yesterday. They should have waited until now. And I'm going to close this video with one final thought from, not me, Seth Walder of Twitter. He had this tweet yesterday afternoon after the Packers game was announced as the Sunday Night Football game. The entire reason the NFL doesn't schedule the times of the Week 18 games is to avoid the situation it just created by putting Lions-Packers on Sunday Night Football. So, if that doesn't expose the very obvious agenda here, I don't know what does. The NFL could have just not done a Sunday Night Football game at all. They could have found a game where it only mattered to one team. They've done that before. No problem. Or they could have just made it Titans-Jaguars, which is not going to be a great game, but it's a guaranteed 100% win and in game for both teams. Could have done it all those different ways, but instead, no. They're going to give it to Green Bay. They're going to make sure the Lions have maximum information, and they're going to potentially derail that game from the Lions' perspective in terms of motivation. So, I'm just not buying it, okay? I'm not buying it, and I'm not happy about it. And if things play out to where the Seahawks win and then the Packers win on Sunday Night Football, it leaves a bad taste. It leaves a bad taste. And I usually don't get this way about things like this, but I'm sorry. I think this calls for it. The NFL has proven, like I just went over, they're willing to modify things, sometimes significantly, to make sure the game is ultra compelling. Every game is as ultra compelling as possible. They're willing to cancel Sunday Night Football. And yet, here we are. All right. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. I know there's nothing we can do about it now, but I had to talk about it for a little bit longer just to push back on some of the narratives here. See you guys later. Go Hawks.